I watched Elysium the other night, and it's one of those films that I like not so much for its story, which isn't great, but for the world it depicts and the questions it implies, especially those left hanging by the rather glib ending. So the setup. Rich people live in a giant gated community in space where they all have big houses with immaculate green lawns and a magic healing pod in their foyer. Meanwhile, Earth is an overpopulated mess of poverty, crime, and general enshittification as the technological civilization that took millennia to build grinds down into ruin. The rich folks in the sky wheel have left Earth behind, aside from a few industrial concerns that are just cheaper to run on the ground, I suppose, and probably some agriculture. Most of Elysium's residents are seen as background. Rich people with families doing rich people things, while cold, evil-adjacent pragmatists do what they perceive as necessary to preserve their little island, even if they overlook some obvious measures to de-escalate conflicts. It's a high-cost undertaking, and you don't build something like that with the intent of turning around to exploit a used-up planet full of hungry gun monkeys. You do it to escape a world that's already failing. It's the start of a breakaway civilization up there, wealthy and possessing some extremely advanced technology absent on Earth. Most notably the healing pods. They're the real driving tech of the story, and they're essentially magic. They can repair wounds, cure cancer, even reconstruct a blown-up face. Just put the subject in there and it fixes them up automatically. No need for doctors. That removing of the need for healthcare professionals and facilities is what the preachy aspects of the story almost entirely hang on. So let's talk about the healthcare access message of this one first. Some have argued that healthcare should be treated as a basic human right, which is fine philosophy, but it gets a little more complicated in practice. Doctors, nurses, and the entire constellation of healthcare professionals and facilities maintenance personnel are what makes it all possible, and they need to be paid for their labor. We can certainly debate the benefits of the social capital created by having healthy citizens and what an optimal rate of taxation to provide it without offsetting the gains with greater damage in other areas. Many countries have been trying out various formulations for decades with both good and ill effects. But we can't just say that healthcare is a basic human right and pretend it's free, nor can we indenture doctors for the good of society and expect anyone to undertake the years of training to enter that profession. But Elysium sidesteps that with these medical miracle tubes. No need for doctors or hospitals or any of the attendant personnel or facilities. Just energy. It's not free, but it's much easier to blend it into general social operating expenses. Everyone uses power plants. If production is high and it's priced affordably, spread across the entire market, you have your universal health care, assuming local communities have access to a few of those pods. But because that access is denied, shiploads of poor earthbound rabble make desperate runs at Elysium to get a session in the healing pods, which only work for citizens of Elysium. The ruling cabal could send down enough of them to do just enough healing on Earth to offset the worst of the revolutionary pressures, but they don't. And Earth is a world where vast overpopulation and extensive automation meet to create poverty and hopelessness. If you're rich enough to live on Elysium, you get automated healthcare and servants. If you're poor on Earth, you get knocked around by robot police, chatbot social workers, and if you're incredibly lucky, a job where they recognize you as a commodity, albeit an abundant one.
I'm docking you half a day. Yeah, all right. You know you're lucky to have this job.
Max here caught a break. Despite a criminal record, he has a job at the robot factory. Because robots are a significant capital investment and require expensive maintenance, whereas working-class broke HSAPs are cheap and can be replaced same day if you break one. It's just cheaper than automating the robot assembly line with more robots, even if you're making the robots in-house. This could end up being the second most prophetic element of this film. While Max is working his shift, we drop out to watch some of those desperate undocumented astronauts get smacked down on their way to Elysium, giving us some indication of how advanced that world's tech is. This shuttle doesn't look like much, but a single stage-to-orbit spacecraft that can be maintained by these goons and flown out of a field is damn impressive, as is the shoulder-fired anti-satellite missile that takes it down. But it's not a shiny new sci-fi world. Where old tech does the job, that's what's used. The robot police beat people with batons and restrain them with zip ties. No need to overcomplicate it. Which gives it a cool cyberpunk vibe, but there's more to it than that. Our frame of reference for the pace of technological development is the last 100 or so years, and the 20th century was a time of weirdly rapid advances across technological fields. The world in the year 2000 was vastly different than in 1900, much more so than most other 100-year periods. Big changes in some areas of science and politics, certainly, but not the full spectrum lurch forward of the 20th century. Invention of the airplane and the moon landing happened within a single lifetime, along with 2 world wars and all that entails. Really weird time. But now we're just beginning to see at least a partial settling into slower, more normal rates of progress in fields like commercial aviation and small arms, for example, which is brilliantly illustrated by the most iconic prop in this film.
Is this a family heirloom?
Highly potent smart munitions controlled through an interface on the weapon. That's a serious high-tech boomstick there. But it's all bolted on mods. At the core, it's an AKM, introduced in the 1950s as the culmination of efforts to deal with some manufacturing issues with Kalashnikov's 1947 design. The programmable airburst projectiles are squeezing performance out of the old 7.62x39 cartridge. There are absolutely better small arms available in that world, but this one is still viable. Just as when the flintlock was coming into common use in the 1500s, matchlock muskets didn't just go away. They were still usable weapons, just not as good. And the flintlock, with gradual iterative improvements, was the standard firearm until the 19th century, when the lock itself was replaced with a percussion cap system, but the rest of the firearm was still the same basic design using the same black powder and lead ball. Firearms today are about where the flintlock was in the early 1800s in terms of being maximized mature technology. The US military is still using what is essentially the Vietnam-era M16, with layers of design tweaks and upgrades based on lessons learned, and I suspect will continue to do so for longer than SIG would like. The Elysium AK is an over-the-top example of that same process. And the whole world of this film is like that. Layers of technology crudely piled on top of each other. The only things that are new are the things that don't have older alternatives. Robots, single-stage spacecraft. But the cars, the cities, the weapons, either minor iterative improvements or straight-up old gear kept in working order by people too poor to replace it. If anything in this movie ends up being 100% prescient, it'll probably be some variant of the AK still showing up in conflict zones in the mid-22nd century. But in this story, after all their struggles, Max and his comrades, who inhabit a space somewhere between a criminal syndicate and a revolutionary movement, get up to Elysium where they help the downtrodden, share the bounty, and fix the world with a line of code. On the premise that the space richies hoarding all the wealth and robot doctors is the core issue that needs to be solved. Only that's a gross misunderstanding of the problem, both in the film's world and in our own. Making everyone a citizen of Elysium works neither as an immigration nor a healthcare access allegory. Because in that setting, Earth's problem isn't just a lack of shiny go-old sarcophagi, but rather a complete systemic breakdown. It can't be fixed by redistribution. Looting Elysium's wealth isn't enough to pull the planet out of collapse. It's less fairly distributing the wealth and more crab trap. To pull Earth out of its collapse, it needs a functioning economy. Maybe a capitalist one. Maybe some kind of post-capitalist automated luxury communism thing with completely different rules. In any case, things have to be produced in large quantities. Does the resource base even allow for that? The film suggests no. Do they have the arable land, the energy capacity, and the ability to produce robots on that scale? Does enough of the population have the skills to farm, build and maintain power plants, mine raw materials? Either way, it'll take time, and during that time, the population pressure will get even worse with the extended lifespans from the magic healing pods, leaving them with a couple of faster options. They can get rid of all the robots, go full shock doctrine, forcing a labor market into existence and all the economic structures that come with it. Or there's the Scrooge protocol. Decrease the surplus population. Let's try to avoid that one, and it's what was happening anyway, just slower. If they want a scenario that doesn't involve a mass culling, it relies heavily on Elysium as a partner not a prize. I'm not defending billionaires hoarding the wealth of society in that world or ours. I'm saying that fairness or equity are not worthy goals in and of themselves if they result in everyone being fairly and equitably broke and hungry. Elysium ends just when things are about to get really dicey, because the entirety of the film strongly suggests three things. Earth is a basket of failed states, and its industries are, at least in part, tied to Elysium. Elysium is wealthy in part because its population is relatively small and isolated, and Elysium is remarkably unstable, both physically and politically. The orbital city faced not only constant pinprick assaults from the would-be revolutionaries that get Max up there, but also a coup from their defense establishment and rogue mercenaries trying to seize control. Not to mention all the physical dangers that come from an orbital array run by a central computer system that will eventually fail. And of course, blowing up ships heading toward them is going to bite them in the ass sooner or later. All that debris doesn't go away. It just zips around really fast until it hits something, making more speeding debris. Imagine trying to run down a hallway while someone randomly blasts buckshot from one of the side rooms. You'll probably be fine once, but keep doing it and you're going to have a really bad day. Kessler syndrome's a bitch. And while many on the ground would cheer at seeing a chunk knocked out of that wheel, they're at a point where maybe keeping it spinning up there and trying to sell them on the benefits of rejuvenating Earth may be their best hope. Because the problem in that world isn't that Elysium is hoarding wealth and technology, it's that things have degraded so much on Earth that there isn't enough to go around. Real limits. So the people that could afford to pack up their marbles and leave did. To elevate Earth out of poverty, they need to produce everything from food to housing to high-tech goods like the medical pods in huge quantities. And to do that, they need help from Elysium. Not as a treasure to loot, not packing the habitat full of refugees, not a token transfer of equipment, but a long-term program of rebuilding. They're at the point where the least bad ending may be Elysium systematically recolonizing Earth. Not sending down vultures to extract wealth.
What do you think I've been doing down here on Earth? Do you think I enjoy breathing this air?
But gentrifying the planet. I don't imagine a movie about pragmatic leaders on a broke-ass Earth trying to find ways to entice the space richies to invest in turning entire continents into semi-autonomous enterprise zones would do well at the box office, but I'd watch it. Though I certainly do understand the appeal of bringing it all down in rage and frustration. That wheel would look pretty cool tumbling into the atmosphere on fire. It's that time again where people have been reporting YouTube randomly unsubscribing them, so maybe take a look.